Hey guys, what's up? Manny from Vegan Rock Climbing here. Welcome back to the channel. It's time to get our hands on another very useful and very versatile rock climbing technique for intermediates. Let's talk about hooks.
Why, a case of hooks! Aye, sir.
First of all, definition, so that we know what we're talking about here. In this video I explained how we can use our toe tips in order to perform smooth, accurate and efficient stepping. Now I want to make you aware that there are two more areas on the climbing shoe, on the feet, which we can utilize in order to perform certain climbing moves more easily and efficiently. And the areas I'm talking about are the heel and, of course, the upper surface of the shoe, the instep. When we use the heel to pull on a certain climbing hold, maybe in order to get closer to a handhold or to pull our body into a mantle, then this is called a heel hook. We use the upper surface from the toes to the instep to pull on a certain climbing hold, and this is called a toe hook. Simple as that. Alright, so now that we know what a hook actually is and how it is performed, we have to ask ourselves what are the major advantages of hooks over just regular stepping with the toe tips. And after thinking about it for a while, I could identify two major advantages. Number one, when placed accurately and in the right situations, a hook can take off much more weight than regular stepping. In any of the following examples, you could also utilize regular stepping on the toe tips in order to perform the move. But due to the characteristics of the foothold, it is much more ideal to utilize a hook. This boulder contains a relatively far reach from two quite medium holds, I would say, which are on the same level height-wise, onto a quite high target hold. And as you can see, the climber has basically two options here. He can either hook the handhold from before for the left hand in order to reach the target hold, or he can utilize regular stepping in order to reach the target hold. And as you can see, the climber who utilizes the hook, the left climber, has a much better leverage here than the climber who utilizes regular stepping. This has simply to do with the fact that the toe tips are further away from the knee than the heel. And apart from that, if you're using your regular stepping, your toe tip, you have to activate more muscle groups for the move, because you have to concentrate on your calves, not only, but also on your hamstrings. And if you are utilizing a hook, you only have to concentrate on your hamstrings, because your calves are pretty much not involved in this move. All in all, the hook has here a much more efficient character, I would say, than the regular stepping. And of course, by utilizing the hook, the move gets a lot easier. The game changes, of course, if we exchange the left hand hold into a smaller hold, because then there is simply not enough space to place a whole heel onto this hole anymore. So here the climber has to utilize regular stepping, because there is no other option. So now we also have discovered the first requirement that a hold must fulfill in order to make a hook even possible, and that is that it has to be big enough in order to fit a whole heel or a whole instep on it. On this boulder problem, the climber has to perform again a relatively far reach from a quite good hold, and he also has the opportunity to utilize this big structure which is down on the right side there. The climber on the left side utilizes the hook, and the climber on the right side utilizes regular stepping. And what you should instantly notice is that the climber on the left side has it much easier to reach the target hold than the climber on the right side, simply because the hook is here much easier to place than the toe tips. And this has to do with the directionality of this big structure down there. Hooks are often advantageous when big, sticking out structures are facing away from the climber hold directionality wise, like in this example. Another indicator for especially heel hooks is when the structure is quite high. The classic example would be if you want to place a hook onto a handhold which is still got in your hand. So obviously this hold has to be quite high because you're still gripping onto it, and the center of your body is quite below this hold probably. And in these examples it's much more practical to place a heel hook onto this handhold than utilizing your toe tips. And this has simply to do with the fact that your toe tips are much further away from the center of your body than your heel. And as you can imagine, in these examples, good flexibility helps a lot when it comes to increasing the number of available options. So all in all, we've identified three indicators now which should signal you that a hook could be a very good option. Number one, big structures, which are number two, quite high, and number three, whose directionality is pointing away from the climber. So these indicators should tell you that a hook should be at least a good option, if not the best option. Now I want to move on to the second big advantage of hooks over regular stepping, and that is simply that some features, some footholds can only be engaged by using a hook. And when I thought about it, I came across three major indicators for these obligatory hooks. On this boulder problem, the climber has to somehow utilize this big yellow structure around the right corner in order to make this far reach onto the target hold far above. The only possibility to get something out of this structure is by utilizing a heel hook. Everything else, like irregular stepping, will not give you any support. So here, classic example of an obligatory hook because the structure is hidden behind a corner, and there are many more. I think this is the most prominent case. The second indicator would be if the structure exhibits a completely averted directionality, meaning that the directionality of the hold is completely facing away from you. Usually you can utilize a toe hook in these cases to get something out of those structures. And if the structure is kind of sticking out of the wall, like in this example, you can also try to squeeze it between the toe hook of one foot and the toe tips of the other foot in order to get even more support out of it. The third indicator for an obligatory hook, and in my opinion the most rare scenario, is when we have a structure that is super high above the climber. Of course, such footholds or such holds in general cannot be utilized by using regular stepping. Like in this example, the climber wants to perform a crossover move onto this edge here in order to get the next hold with the left hand. To do so, he has to utilize this super big jug actually, which is quite far above him. If he wants to do so, he needs to do a heel hook. There is simply no other option. So to conclude, sometimes structures can only be engaged by using hooks, and these are often hidden behind corners, or they exhibit a completely averted directionality, or they are super high above the climber. As you can imagine, and as I pointed out in other episodes already, here it's of special importance that you are aware of all your options, because it may determine whether you're getting a certain problem done or not, may it be indoors or outdoors. And also a gentle reminder here that a greater flexibility will always increase your available number of options. There is no disadvantage in being more flexible, and this is especially true when it comes to the topic of hooks. So now that we've covered the advantages of placing hooks in general, number 1, relieving your hands by taking off lots of weight, and number 2, engaging features which would be otherwise inaccessible, I want to go a little bit more into the detail of the mechanics of a hook. And by doing so, I will try to provide you with a little checklist full of details which I've discovered so far in my climbing, which may determine whether a certain hook works or not. First of all, I want you to be aware of the fact that there are close and distant hooks. Both heel and toe hooks can be executed in a close or distant manner, so to say. And there is a significant difference when it comes to directional loading between those two. On this boulder, I'm placing my heel hook quite early in the game, close to my hands, and from there on I'm climbing and climbing and climbing without readjusting my foot whatsoever. So the distance between my center of gravity and the hook increases and increases, and this of course changes the directional loading of the hook and thus the probability of the hook to slip off. Here's another example with toe hooks. At the beginning, I simply place my toe hooks quite close to my hands, and from there on I start to climb until the distance between my center of gravity and the toe hooks is very big. So as you can see here in this demonstration, the directional loading of the toe hooks is completely changed in comparison to the start. And in this case, it increases actually the probability of the toe hook to stick, because as you can see, the more I'm getting my center of gravity away from the toe hooks, the more ideal the directional loading becomes, and the greater the pressure on the toe hooks becomes as well. More pressure means more friction and greater probability of the toe hooks to stick. So here you have to keep in mind that when placing a toe hook, it really matters where your center of gravity is, on how much pressure you're getting on the toe hook and how good it will hold. Another thing would be when it comes to heel hooks, you should be aware that you can either hook with this frontal area of the heel, or you can hook with the side, more lateral area of the heel. And of course, depending on your climbing shoe, it is very crucial to know where you have the best friction and stuff. In this case here, the 510 team, I really like the frontal heel hooks, which are quite solidly in the middle onto this strip here, but I don't like the lateral area so much, the side area here, because I have the feeling it has a little bit less friction than this area here. In principle, mid heel used versus side heel used, be aware that there is a difference and that some certain hooks may demand a certain area than others. Another detail would be, as I already mentioned, especially if structures are sticking out of the wall, you can squeeze them between a hook and a stepping, a regular stepping for example. As in this case here, where I'm squeezing this structure here between a toe hook and regular stepping, or between a heel hook and regular stepping. And of course, sometimes you can also squeeze structures between two heel hooks. I think there is no possibility that you can squeeze a structure between two toe hooks, because that would require insane flexibility, but yeah, maybe something like this is out there, I don't know. But be aware of that, sometimes you can squeeze structures in order to get even more support out of them. What you should consider as well when approaching a hook problem is the importance of the non-hooking leg. You have basically two options here. You can either put it really close to the hooking leg, or you can put it really far away from the hooking leg, kind of in a 90-degree angle of the two. And of course you can do anything in between. And you might have noticed this already, but the positioning of the non-hooking leg relative to the hooking leg has a really big influence on whether the hook sticks or not. And in my personal experience, it's often better to spread the legs apart in this 90-degree angle in order to make the hook stick. I think it has something to do with the center of gravity that gets dragged below the wall, below the hook, which really makes the hook stick because you get more pressure on it. So keep that in mind. The positioning of the non-hooking leg is important as well. And the final tip that I want to give you here is that you can sometimes literally lock in your hook by turning your foot. Now this is of course very dependent on the shape and on the structure of the foothold that you want to hook, but it usually works best when the foothold is quite close to the actual wall, because then you can lock in your feet between the wall and the foothold itself, and this of course will create more friction and will lead to a greater probability of the hook to stick. Sometimes this feels a little scary because you have the feeling if you're slipping off something else, your hook might stick into place and you're going to rip your knee apart or something like that.
If I got locked away.
So far I didn't hear from any incident where this actually happened, but however, be a little careful as always. As you can see, the more advanced the techniques get, the less I can provide you with a general recipe which always works. Rather, I'll try to make you aware of all your options in order to make sure that you'll find the easiest solution for your next problem as quickly as possible. And guys, don't forget to stretch, because flexibility increases the number of available options drastically. And with these thoughts, I want to end this analysis of yet another rock climbing technique for intermediates. I hope you've got something from it. If you did, please leave a like, it helps a lot. And also leave your opinion in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe for future awesome technique episodes. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye. And in my opinion, the